The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense as Camille stepped up to stand before Judge Harrison, a single mother facing $200 parking fines she had been struggling to pay, and her voice trembled as she tried to justify why she shouldn't be forced to pay the hefty charge. Behind the massive oak desk, the judge, known for his strict adherence to the law, sat with a grave expression, his eyes fixed on Camille. As Camille stood, the audience whispered among themselves, guessing how this case would turn out. "Order in the court!" Judge Harrison bellowed, banging his gavel. The room fell into an eerie silence until, suddenly, a tiny voice broke through the tension with a request for hamburgers. It was Lena, Camille's 6-year-old daughter, standing next to her mother. The courtroom gasped. Normally, such an innocent comment might have caused a chuckle, but Judge Harrison's courtroom was known for its harshness. This type of interruption was completely unprecedented and unthinkable. Camille blushed a deep shade of red, mortified by her daughter's outburst. Had Lena just ruined their chances of escaping this fine? She shot Lena a worried glance, but the little girl was oblivious to the tension around her, standing still with wide, innocent eyes. Judge Harrison, surprisingly calm, raised an eyebrow. There was no anger in his expression, just curiosity. "Did you say hamburgers, young lady?" he asked, his tone unexpectedly kind. This was not the stern judge everyone in the courtroom was used to. All eyes were on Lena, and Camille held her breath, hoping the judge wouldn't lose patience. But Lena didn't respond to the judge's gentle inquiry. Instead, her gaze was fixed on a painting of a somber-looking man wearing a wig that hung on the wall. Camille's heart raced. This was not going as planned. Surprisingly, Judge Harrison didn't react as Camille feared. Instead, he shifted his attention from Lena to Camille for a moment, the silence hanging heavy in the room. Then he resumed his questioning, his eyes softening slightly. "Is there anything you'd like to tell me, young lady?" Before Camille could answer, Lena marched toward the judge's bench. "Yes, sir," she said without hesitation. Lena complained that her stomach was growling loudly, that she was hungry from all the talking, and she and her mother still hadn't had breakfast. Camille's face turned bright red with embarrassment. While she was trying to handle a critical issue in front of such a stern judge, her daughter was asking for food. The morning rush had been chaotic. Getting Lena ready, packing her school bag, and enduring rush-hour traffic left them with no time for breakfast. Now, Camille feared the judge might view them as careless. Despite the embarrassment, Lena's candidness, though awkward, seemed almost endearing. Camille tried to apologize, but the judge stopped her with a slight wave of his hand. "Lena," he said, his voice calm, "especially when you're hungry, court can be a long and boring place. Why don't you come up here and tell me more about these hamburgers?" Everyone in the room was stunned. Even Judge Harrison appeared a little uncertain after his inquiry about hamburgers. Lena looked up at her mother, asking for permission. Camille, unsure of what to expect, could only nod. Lena eagerly skipped over to the judge's desk, a wide smile on her face. The courtroom watched, holding its breath. No one could have predicted what would happen next. Judge Harrison reclined in his chair and observed as Lena approached the small platform in front of him. The atmosphere in the room shifted. Was he still upset about the interruption? Would he punish Lena for disobeying him? Everyone was on edge, waiting to see what would come next. Camille's life was a never-ending battle between employment, childcare, and making ends meet as a single mother to her energetic 6-year-old daughter, Lena. Except for Lena waking up sniffling and coughing, signaling that a cold might be on the way, every morning felt like an experiment in balancing these demands. Camille had to pick up Lena's medication before work, but she also needed to get to her bakery shift on time. Camille started getting ready as quickly as possible, packing a small bag with tissues and mints, wrapping Lena in warm clothes, and making sure she had her favorite stuffed animal for comfort. Unfortunately, her wishes went unmet as she hurried Lena out the door, praying that traffic wouldn't be too bad. But of course, all the traffic lights were red, turning what should have been a short drive to the pharmacy into a frustrating ordeal. Camille was already running late when she finally made it to the store. Anxiety was in the air as soon as Camille parked in the pharmacy parking lot. Every space was taken. She noticed a vacant spot next to the door, but it was reserved for handicapped parking. Camille knew better than to park there, but time was running out. She quickly did the math in her head. It'll only take a few minutes, she told herself. She parked in the spot, figuring no one would need it, and she would be in and out quickly. But for single mothers, things rarely go as planned. Those few minutes stretched to 10, then 15, and the pharmacy line moved agonizingly slow, as each customer took forever to sort out their prescription. By the time Camille finally got the medication, she practically ran back to the car. As she approached, she started to feel guilty for taking the risk with the parking space. Was her absence too long? When she saw the vivid orange envelope tucked beneath her windshield wiper, her stomach dropped. Her concerns were confirmed. It was a $200 parking fine. For Camille, who was already on a tight budget, $200 felt like a punch to the gut. That amount was over half of her weekly grocery budget. How could she pay this fine in the coming days? Camille started calculating, cutting out things she could do without, including gas for the car and her daily coffee. But the truth was undeniable. She couldn't afford the fine. She faced a difficult choice. Either she would pay the fine and miss rent payments, or she would appear in court and make her case. The thought of going to court, dealing with intimidating judges and the complicated process, made her want to back out. But the $200 fine was simply too much to ignore, so Camille decided to take her chances in court. Maybe, just maybe, the judge would understand and grant her some mercy. In the days leading up to her court date, Camille studied parking laws and practiced her justification. She was nervous, wondering if the magistrate would even listen to her reasoning. Could she persuade him to overlook the ticket? Her confidence was nearly gone by the time she stepped into the courthouse with its high ceilings and grim-faced security officers. The atmosphere was dark and serious. When she stood before Judge Harrison, Camille was trembling uncontrollably. She tried to describe the situation, her voice wavering as she explained how busy she was as a single mother, how she had rushed to pick up Lena's medication, and how the parking situation had resulted in the ticket. She practiced her justification in advance, trying to demonstrate to the judge the dire circumstances that led to her mistake. She was polite, clear, and sincere, hoping to convince the court of her genuine situation. Judge Harrison listened intently, his face unreadable. He didn't show any reaction to her explanation, which only made Camille feel more anxious. His reputation as a no-nonsense judge was well known. He followed the rules to the letter and rarely made exceptions. Camille could see him leafing through the case file, and with each passing second, her heart sank. Despite her best efforts, the judge didn't seem swayed. He questioned her sharply, focusing only on the parking violation, not her reasons for it. Camille braced herself, feeling like he would not only stick to the fine but raise it as a punishment for taking up the court's time. Just when Camille was about to give up, she heard an unplanned outburst from the judge. At that moment, Lena, who had remained silent the entire time, spoke up, asking for hamburgers. Camille had never taught Lena about court hearings, but the last thing she expected was for her to blurt out a comment like that. Camille quickly apologized, explaining that the morning rush had prevented them from having breakfast. She believed that this was just another poor decision, and she worried that the judge would conclude that she was not only a careless driver, but also a careless mother. Lena and Judge Harrison were seated side by side in front of the inquisitive court. At this point, even Camille sympathized with her young daughter, who was simply trying to escape the somber environment and get some food. Judge Harrison leaned forward, speaking directly to Lena with a very soft voice. He informed the young girl that he only needed to ask her a few questions, even though he knew it had been a difficult morning for her. "What type of work does your mommy do?" was his first question. The judge's gentle tone gave Lena courage, and she responded right away. She explained that her mother worked a lot of overtime at the bakery, making delicious cakes and sweets. Camille also occasionally worked late shifts as a waiter at a local restaurant. Judge Harrison nodded, his curiosity piqued, and asked more mild questions to learn more about Camille's life, managing several jobs as a single mother. Lena, just 6 years old, began to understand how difficult her mother's situation was. She described how Camille often had to work long hours to make ends meet, which left them with little free time. As they listened to Lena's story, the courtroom fell silent. People who had previously only seen Camille as a person with a parking infraction were now aware of her true identity, a single mother who struggled to support her family. Even Lena's disclosure of the tragic events that had led to Camille's predicament was depressing. Her words made Camille's heart ache. Although Lena hadn't meant to reveal so much, her candor had a way of revealing things, and Camille felt a wave of melancholy sweep over her as she thought back to her heartbreak. Being a single parent meant more than just balancing a job and taking care of a child. It was also an ongoing struggle against the betrayal that had led her to this point. Camille had started dating Darius, her boyfriend of 4 years, when Lena was just 3. After being released from prison for a small possession charge, Darius had promised Camille that he was drug-free and that he would dedicate himself to their family. Love and hope had blinded Camille, and she returned his trust. Back then, Camille had been diligently saving money for her college degree. She dreamed of a fresh start where she and Darius would raise Lena together and build a better life. But one morning that trust was shattered. Camille woke up to find that all of her savings were gone, and so was Darius. Worse, Camille discovered that not only had Darius taken her money, but he had also fled with her younger sister, who had been deceived by his false promises and betrayed Camille to be with him. The betrayal devastated Camille. Darius had not only stolen her future, but also abandoned her and Lena. Despite reporting the theft, the money was never recovered. Camille was left to pick up the pieces and raise Lena on her own. After enduring the heartbreak caused by both Darius and her sister, Camille had to let go of her college ambitions due to the financial strain and focus on working multiple low-paying jobs to get by. The difficulty she faced was a direct result of the theft, and this made the $200 parking fine feel like a small fortune. The judge, along with everyone in the courtroom, paid close attention to Lena's account. Judge Harrison seemed genuinely moved by the young girl's words. He probed further, trying to understand more about Camille's predicament and the difficulties they were facing. With each response, Judge Harrison's viewpoint seemed to soften. Camille, relieved, saw a glimmer of empathy in his eyes instead of the rigid, uncompromising judge she had heard so much about. Then, in a surprising turn, Judge Harrison did something completely unexpected. He addressed Lena directly. "Well, Lena," he said, "since your mommy broke the parking rule, what do you think her punishment should be?" The courtroom held its breath. This was unprecedented. Camille's eyes widened in disbelief. Did the judge really think a 6-year-old could have an opinion? But Lena, unfazed by the unexpected question, shot the judge a sympathetic glance. "You're a capable judge," she said, "so you should make the decision." For the first time that day, the courtroom erupted in laughter, a first for anyone who had been there. Not even Judge Harrison could hide a slight smile. Judge Harrison could barely suppress a smile in the often tense courtroom. It seemed that Lena's candidness and innocence had disarmed him. The judge would then decide what to do next, and everyone waited anxiously for his reply. Judge Harrison reclined in his chair, seemingly deep in thought. The brief pause was abruptly interrupted when he raised his hand, calling for the bailiff. As everyone stood, the judge leaned in, whispering some directions. The bailiff nodded and left through a side door. A few moments later, murmurs of confusion buzzed through the courtroom. What was the judge planning to do? The bailiff returned, carrying a brown paper bag. The judge took it from him and handed it to Lena, a grin spreading across his face. "You're welcome, young lady," he said gently. He informed Lena that they needed to take care of her rumbling stomach before the court could continue. Inside the bag were juice boxes and sandwiches, nicely packaged. Lena's smile stretched across her face, her eyes widening in joy. Camille was flooded with emotions she never imagined she'd feel in a courtroom. In their current circumstances, even a small gesture like this meant a great deal. After the unexpected food break, The judge resumed the session, but this time everything felt different. Rather than making his usual snap decisions, Judge Harrison carefully reviewed Camille's case. He discovered that her driving record was clean and her legal background impeccable. In fact, after 9 years, this was Camille's only parking infraction. Judge Harrison then turned to Camille and delivered his ruling. Everyone gasped at what he did next. He chose to dismiss the ticket, taking into account her prior behavior and the circumstances of her case. The courtroom erupted in applause, and a wave of relief flooded Camille's heart, as if a heavy weight had been lifted off her shoulders. But the judge wasn't done yet. He produced a piece of paper and informed Camille that he recognized the difficulties of being a single mother. On the paper was a list of local resources available for single mothers, including child care support services and career training programs. Most of these services were offered free of charge online. Camille's eyes filled with gratitude. This had become far more than she could have imagined. Overcome with emotion, Camille began to stammer, unsure of how to properly express her gratitude. Judge Harrison gave her an unexpected smile. "As far as I'm concerned," he said, "this is justice with a dash of charity. No thanks are required." The community was soon informed of Judge Harrison's act of kindness. The story made its way to social media and regional news outlets, where people were taken aback by the judge's sincere concern for Camille and Lena. In addition to dismissing the ticket, the judge's generosity and the resources he provided gave Camille the confidence to start over. She utilized the child care aid and enrolled in the online degree program, ensuring that Lena was well cared for. Camille felt a little more at ease and hopeful about a future with greater security. Judge Harrison's worldview had shifted through his interaction with Camille and Lena, awakening a long-dormant empathy within him. He realized that while the law is sacred, its purpose is protection rather than punishment. He now saw the law as a tool for safeguarding the most vulnerable members of society rather than merely a strict set of regulations. What a sweet and endearing tale. This demonstrates that compassion and empathy can be shown anywhere, even inside the official courtroom walls. What's your experience with judges and courts? Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.